those Butterboys, they used to walk the butter over the moor, delivering it to the families that needed it. It was a duty. It was a local duty that was required for a certain type of boy. And the ones that chose to deliver the butter, they chose a certain way of life which not everyone would wish for upon themselves, but these Butterboys, they were dedicated folk. And I, for one, respect them greatly, and I think they're going to be part of this landscape for a very long time, and certainly in the memories of many who have received butter from them. Butter delivered over the moor by the Butterboys is probably the finest tasting butter I've ever had. Yet amongst the delivering of butter, the Butterboys, they used to do, they had a lifestyle, a certain type of life that, had a few nuances to it. They used to quaint local pubs, and they used to spend time there by the fireside, drawing quite a lot of attention to themselves, writing poetry and reading poetry, and they would explain to the locals what they were up to, and they would seem flabbergasted and such like, and conversations would be sometimes long, sometimes short amongst the locals, depending on the interest of that night. But the Butterboys tended to keep themselves to themselves if they could. They were modest folk, just in it to deliver the butter over the moors. And yes, well, what can we say about that? I mean, the poetry still, some of it still exists and can be found, in the cracks of rocks and upon the moor, and in the wind. Sometimes you hear the poetry being heard across the moor if it's blowing in the right direction. So yes, these Butterboys, they were hardy folk. Could last days out on the moor with very little, but they were also very gentle and soft, and had a certain tenderness to them that was like nothing else I've witnessed before. They were weak, and they were strong, and they were soft, and they were hard, and they were artistic, and they were kind of workaholics and straightforward in some ways as well. So it's quite hard to put them in a box, if you see what I mean. And but their passion was to deliver the butter over the moors, and that it really boiled down to that. And that's why the communities here are in so much pay so much respect to the Butterboys, because they're so part of it, and they're so essential to the way of life here. Yes, the Butterboys, they used to carry the butter, not very much butter. They used to carry a small block over the moors, no more than 100 grams of butter, and this would be carried in a kind of pouch upon their back. Some of them preferred to carry it by hand, and others preferred to carry it under their arm, or between the legs, or in their mouth in some occasions. There was lots of ways to carry the butter, and they were quite personal to the carrier themselves, and really depended on the Butterboy what they wanted to do on that very day. And But yes, they carried it. They carried it long distances, across the far moors, and they'd be out for a day and a night and a night and a day, and they'd be sleeping upon rocks if the weather allowed it, or sometimes they'd find themselves a little crack in the moor and post themselves in there for the night. And sometimes they'd just walk through the night and carry the butter. And even if it was a particularly warm spell, they would travel at night to keep the butter from melting. They were quite precious about the butter. The condition of the butter was essential, and it was a massive care that they had for butter, and they loved the stuff themselves as well. And they'd often take a small pouch of butter just to keep themselves going along the way. And they just take a little fingerful of butter here and there along the way, just keep them ticking over, and it would remind them what they were doing it for, really. And it was for the love of butter, and it was for the love of sharing butter amongst this community, and that was really what it was about, I think. I mean, I'm no expert, but I've studied the Butterboys for over nearby a decade now, and there's not loads of information on them, actually, and it's quite hard to find anything on Wikipedia or anything like that, because the Butterboys were very much ground-based, and, they travelled, and they didn't have Instagram accounts, and they didn't have this, and they didn't have that the modern folk have. They just had pen, paper, and butter pouch, and a good pair of shoes, and that was about it. And, it was a simple way of life. Yes, that's right. There has been word that there are still a few Butterboys out there working the moors, and I for one believe it. I've got a sense for these things, and like I say, I've studied them, the Butterboys, for nearby a decade now, and I've kind of tracked them here and there. I've never met a Butterboy, but I've met folk that have met Butterboys, and down in the villages, in the pubs they used to frequent, and heard a fair tale of stories behind them. Obviously the moors echo their name and their poetry throughout them. So they're very much part of this place. How many Butterboys have there been? Oh, it's a difficult question. I mean, there's been many, I'm sure, and it runs through the families that care, and it's becoming potentially a modern boy might find themselves in this trade as well, because there's a tradition to it. There's a folk kind of practice to it, which people are connecting to again in these parts, and I'm hoping it's feeling like it's going to become part of this contemporary landscape again, and be part of contemporary life as the world modernizes, and we can get next day delivery from Amazon Prime and via a drone that's flown to our house. Now we don't want that, really, do we? We'd prefer we prefer to be delivered butter over the moor, and we prefer to wait for it for several days whilst it travels, and I think that's what people would rather have than all these modern fads. So yes, I'm hoping there is a resurgence going on at the moment, and let's keep our ear to the ground with that one, shall we? Yeah, people do ask, they say, why don't you just go down to Co-op to get your butter? And, I just think, what a stupid question that is.